Would you stop them from getting a new car? If you wouldn't, why would you stop someone from going to get a new body?
I would say lack of understanding, selfishness, lack of consideration.
All of those things, but mostly this idea that somehow we have in our mass consciousness that it is a negative to leave the pain and suffering of the third dimension.
That's wild. Yeah, it is.
I believe that we're in sleepy time, and that when you die, you actually wake up. That there is a higher version of ourselves that exists in a higher realm or a higher dimension, a higher state of being. And that this is the proving or the testing ground to learn lessons and transmit information back to your higher self. And that at some point, you wake up to your real you. And death is not to be worried or afraid of death. It's just another transition into another state of being. And that energy can't be destroyed in science. You know, the second law of thermodynamics. Energy can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed. So I'm never worried about death. I'm not worried about passing away or dying, because I know that I am already immortal. I am already eternal. It's just an energy formation of me existing here temporally in this form, in this avatar body, but on the eternal scale, I've been here for eons.
Welcome to Call for the Truth. I am LaOta of the Sun, and this is Tarvars of the Sun. And we are here today to talk to you about death. But before we begin, Tarvars, will you bring us into the Call for the Truth?
Well, certainly. And we encourage you all to join us in the call for the truth. Shall we call forth the frequency of truth? Shall we call to see the truth in all that we see? Shall we call to hear the truth in all that we hear? Shall we call to speak the truth, calling forth the courage to speak the truth? Shall we call forth nothing less than the truth to come forward into our experience? And now that we are in the truth, if you want to continue joining us in the call for the truth, click that subscribe button, little bell notification to stay updated. And here we are talking about death.
Yes, it's quite a topic. People are asking about it. People are experiencing death in their families and their friends. At younger ages than I think I remember it happening.
They don't make them like they used to.
The idea of 2025 has been prophesized as a year of the great leaving, where many will die for a variety of different reasons. Some people are already experiencing unusual deaths with people who are 40 and younger, unexpected, from a variety of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very much in the air.
Well, certainly.
Yes.
So let's start here. We can see how humanity's perception of death is very skewed. It's the one thing that's guaranteed. Like, I can't guarantee you a cell will be here next week, but I can guarantee you that this life experience will conclude. And we spoke about in a previous episode of life after life, or the hereafter. So here we are again.
Yes.
Especially with people who subscribe to the idea of reincarnation, but there's still this apprehensiveness towards death and this adverse reaction. So would you speak about, like, you're a trained shaman, even though you are beyond shamanism in terms of your understandings and the way you operate. What is the way how some of the ancients used to deal with death? Like, what was the perspective with death?
Well, there's several different things we can go to, but what I wanted to say first is you may remember a movie called, I think it was it Mr. Smith? Or it's this movie about death with Brad Pitt. And one of the lines in the movie is death and taxes. So those are the two things you can't, that's an old cliche. You can't get away from death and taxes. Well, taxes may be changing.
Yeah.
Death still looks like it's on the agenda.
Yeah.
And we all know that all of us know that there's no expectation that we will outlive our lifetime. You know, that we know that this story ends and expires, and we do too. However, we always are surprised, or we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen or stop people from doing it or making that choice or that decision, but that doesn't really fit in with the actuality of our experience. The ancients understood, the most ancient of people understood that this is just one phase of a many pronged educational process, that we are multidimensional beings and we move from dimension to dimension, and that this is, so to say, a school where it's kind of funny, but where death is the inevitable result of the graduation process. You know, you leave. Not only did they understand that we are energy and energy cannot be destroyed, it can only exist in other forms, there is also processes to help us ease from one dimensional experience to another, which I'll go into later. But did you have something?
Yeah, so that's a very different perspective.
Yes.
It's has a light feel to it, where it's not a doom and gloom, but this is, oh man, I'm all right, death, come on in. It's all right.
Yeah.
It's a whole different feel. This is a transition. I'm moving from one experience to the next.
Yeah.
So where did we get this taint from?
Well, so I think the first thing to say is death is not our enemy. It may free us to move on to the next higher experience, but it is a control device that's been used by the controllers or the herders, those who humanity has listened to make us think that it is somehow a detriment, even though we can see, and we have so many contradictory ideas, we can see that a person's body gets old and broken and they need a new vehicle to ride around in. But we're like trying to make them stay in the old broken vehicle that is painful and difficult to be in when they could be free of that. So there's that juxtaposition. The way that I was taught was, my guidance shared with me, would you stop somebody from going to get a brand new car if they wanted a new car? If they could make it happen, would you stop them from getting a new car if their old car wasn't really working or didn't work well or wasn't reliable? Maybe it wasn't reliable to walk across the room. maybe it couldn't go to the store anymore.
Yeah.
Would you stop them from getting a new car? If you wouldn't, why would you stop someone from going to get a new body?
I would say lack of understanding, selfishness, lack of consideration.
All of those things, but mostly this idea that somehow we have in our mass consciousness that it is a negative to leave the pain and suffering of the third dimension.
That's wild. Yeah, it is.
That somehow you need to stay here in the painful, broken, uncomfortable experience of the body, if that's the reason why you're moving towards death, because it's not the only reason. But if that's the reason why, you need to stay here because we're here.
You know, it's interesting. I'm thinking about how we not only do this with people who we love, because that don't feel like love. It's like, don't leave me. I will stay here without you. But people also do it with animals. I've seen this where I know somebody right now who everybody knows this animal needs to go on. He's not moving like he used to.
Right.
And it's like the person won't let him.
It's really and I'll speak about this a little bit. We here at Of the Sun, we have an animal communicator, and we are aware of the natural processes of nature. And what happens is when an animal or animals live with people, they take on the frequencies and the characteristics. They get our diseases.
They even start looking like us.
They get fat. They all the things that they would never happen in the wild or in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And the animals are give themselves over to be of service to us. So when we don't let them go, they stay in the discomfort of their experience for us. You know, it's not the other. We are not their caretakers. They are taking care of us. They are adding the emotional experience that we need to have. That's why many prisoners and many people who are elderly they have pet therapy. That's why people allow for people to have their comfort animals with them, is the animal is taking care of the person. We should not get that mixed up. So when a lot of times what happens is that the person has become dependent and has not considered the animal. So in nature, it's different than in humanity. In nature, it's about quality of life. So a person could live in a hospital bed, or like some of our famous scientists, in a wheelchair, nothing working, and be fine for 30 years. Not so much for animals. You know, you in a pack of wolves and you're not able to keep up. They're like, go ahead. Release me from this body so I can be free, because it's all about quality of life. It's not about having surgery after surgery, or it's nothing. I'm not saying that's a wrong thing for humans, but it's not the same thing for an animal.
Yeah. But
And we can see by the natural laws in nature that system is not set up. When a squirrel breaks his leg, the squirrel doctor doesn't come in and put him to the side and then work on his pancreas later and come back, and that's just not in that world, because it's not appropriate, because it's quality of life, the exuberance and the experience of joy and movement, the natural experience of being in nature. All of those things are different with our pets. They become more acclimated to us, and even when they come back not ever going back into the animal kingdom again.
Yeah, they've been around humans.
Yes. So it's a different experience, but that does often happen, that we attribute our human disposition to the animals who don't have it.
Yeah, a direct overlay. It's very obvious.
I have some questions from someone not so very long ago who had a cat, and the cat kept bringing in mice. And he was horrified that the cat was
doing what it does.
Yeah, the cat was living the experience of a cat.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he was a house cat, but cats are different. And so
they still got that wild in them.
And he was concerned about the pain and suffering of the mice. And I explained that in nature, the entity jumps out of the body before it dies. What happens with humans is we get stuck because of our psychological disposition. But the natural, and people tell you all the time, I had an out-of-body experience when I had a car accident. They jumped out of their body.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of near-death, out-of-body. That's what that is. Only animals who are not tainted by civilization, when a hawk picks up a chicken and the chicken knows it's about it jumps out, so that it doesn't have the experience of what happens to the body. So that can happen to humans. It's the way things were designed, but our own thought patterns keep us in or out. So it doesn't happen in every case, but it's a misunderstanding, because we tend to overlay what happens to humans to animals.
Mm-hmm.
And in the natural experience of things living by killing something else to live, it's not the experience that we're having when in a human environment, with the levels of distortion that we have accepted about life and death.
It makes a lot of sense. I want to shift a little bit. So what's a way how we can kind of heal this relationship with death, especially for people who subscribe to, I've had many past lives, but I'm scared, or I don't want so-and-so, my animal or my family member or friend, to leave me. You know, there's a grave incongruency, even a cognitive dissonance, one would say. Mm-hmm. How can we reconcile that?
You know, death is not our enemy. It is the escort to the next experience. Death is really not our enemy, any more than decomposition of garbage is our enemy. The intelligence of the process of decomposition or death is somewhat similar. They are two different things, but it stems from the great intelligence of creation to break down, what an animal left, and then it turns into fertilizer to grow a garden.
As well, because as you're saying that, I
Yeah.
see where if we had a better connection with nature,
Yes.
our relationship with death would be very
Yes.
different, because we compost, and I feel so good about the compost. I'm like, ooh, look at this rich soil. Oh my gosh. For what was scraps or considered dead food, it's going back through the process to help gestate new life.
So, but in our minds as humans, current humans, think of decomposition as all. I don't want anything to do with that. But in point of fact, it's adjacent to the idea of the intelligence of creation that comes in with the processes that move one thing to the next thing, that translate, that transmute, that move a thing from what it was in one. There's no waste. There's no waste. There's no waste. The only waste we see is human waste. Nature, there really is no waste. The elephant poops, they walk on it, then the ground, the earth becomes fertile, and then other things happen, other insects and beetles and this and birds and everything. There is no waste. So there is no reason for us to have a negative thought about death or the decomposition of the experience that we live in. It is the vehicle that carries us around, but it doesn't need to go to a junkyard, where there's just a bunch of cars parked. That's the human understanding of what to do with things that are no longer useful in this experience.
Just hoard them and stash them away in a dusty, rusty space.
And it becomes a burden to society and a burden to the land it's on, and a burden and poisonous and all of those carcinogenic, where the processes of creation are so exquisitely tuned to serve everything in every way. And so death is in that experience and should be revered. It should not be where, it should be like, like at the end of this lifetime, I know I'm going to die. I think I'll make peace with death now. Like, I see that you have come for my relatives and friends. I see they were ready to go. I also know and am clear, no man leaves here except by his own will. So I have seen people who say, oh, I'm so tired. They just tire themselves right on off the planet. But that was their will to have that experience and tire themselves. But in point of fact, nobody's hitting anybody over the head and dragging them off, even if it appears that way. The behavior that puts someone in a predicament where they get in a situation is often because of ancestral past life or the experience of the lifetime, where there's a greater lesson to be learned, that without the proper investigation, there could be a lack of respect for the choices the soul has made.
So this touches a really good point, because when things like that are perceived as negative happen, many people, of course, it's not favorable from our current understanding, but there is an absence of, oh, these things happen because they were supposed to. There's continuity or universal forces and resonance and pulling and attracting experiences. It's as if that aspect is null and void and does not apply to these type of experiences. Would you talk a little bit about, because you teach this in the soul translation class, about how souls have exit points, and it speaks to or highlights how the soul not only chooses its entry and some of the experiences and parents, etc., for its growth and evolution, but it also chooses when it leaves as well. So that says so much. Like, for example, that there is a level of power within the experience of the soul, but more so that there are no victims with the experience of what we refer to as death or exiting out of this experience. Would you speak a little bit more about that?
I'd like to begin by just saying what you first were saying about people have a problem with it is we hold so many conflicting ideas. We say we believe in a creator who knows everything, who's in charge of everything. It is his will that everything happens. But then we think, except for that.
Yeah, it's just incongruencies.
So
Just
I mean, so
so
I'm
big.
more saying that this is what many people say.
So it's not just the reincarnation, New Ageies, religious, and
No, it's
everyone.
many. There are incongruencies because we have not been taught to thoroughly examine what really is happening,
Hmm.
and we have not been encouraged to look deeper than the third dimensional experience. So that's the very first part. The second part is that yes, we do teach, and not only do we teach it, but ancient astrology also teaches that there's when you have your astrology done, you give them the birth time and the birth place. That's the entry point of the soul into the third dimension, because when a person is pregnant with the living fetus, it's not in the third dimension, it's in another dimension. So we note when it enters into the third dimension by the birth time and birth date. Before any of that was decided, which that was decided before that event, the exit point is decided as well. So a soul may come in through people's common understanding of astrology, they may be very comfortable with the fact that that's your birthday, that's where we're going to calculate from. But ancient astrology taught the birth entry and the birth exit. So we teach the exit points as well, so we can look and use the methods that we have to determine when the person will exit and in what country, what town, what city. And this is information that the person already organized themselves before they came into the third dimension, before they became, before the mother became pregnant with them. This is the soul is in contract for this already. So when some people don't want to know and they don't have to, and it's not all written in stone, some of that is flexible. For instance, if we look at astrology, it is a roadmap for the third dimensional man. So for those who enter this, they may find that it helps them navigate. Everyone doesn't, feel that way about it, and we don't, we're not encouraging astrology. I'm just saying it's one of many ancient roadmaps that still exist that people are familiar with. That's what I'm saying about it. So in that process, when a person, if you consider that, when a person does something to pop themselves out of the third dimensional understandings, like they get a soul clearing, or they learn deep esoteric work, or they move into inner work and meditation and breath work, they may move their exit point, because as they become more of service to humanity, they may not need to exit at the same point they thought they might before. When they laid out their plan, the divine plan, it was based on what they thought would happen. Now, if they exceed the plan, or if they go beyond the plan, or if they learn more, then they then become a service, and it's really a better idea for them to stay longer. So that may happen. I have seen people who we knew that they might exit in Africa, and they lived in Arkansas, and somehow a trip came up and they went somewhere and they ended up having a heart attack in Africa.
Yeah.
So I've actually seen this happen, and it's a very interesting thing. So once we accept the idea that we have an entry point and an exit point, it takes the edge off of thinking that death is the boogeyman, or that we don't have anything to do with when it happens. Not only is there a plan, but there's also room for it to shift. The exit point can move backward or forward based on the person's lifestyle.
Yeah.
Does that answer
This it says so much, and we don't have enough time to really explore all the different. There's so much nuance. Just to
Yes.
recap, we as souls, we come in, we choose it, we choose when to leave, but even the time of, or the point at which we leave, can be adjusted in this lifetime, which is already accounted for.
Yes.
So it's like, look, like if you do good, you could get some bonus time, extend your experiences. But my understanding is this is more so predicated upon like the level of value
You make yourself of service.
the
You make
universe
yourself of
sees.
service to all of humanity or to a portion of humanity. There's benefit.
Gotcha.
There's benefit multidimensionally. There's benefit in this body, there's benefit in the next body after you do exit. There's benefit in your exaltation, in your ascension process. There's benefit. So, it's actually the death doorway, the open sesame of death can be not what current fear makes us think.
I have one more thing, and I know we're close to the edge of running over, but this idea of, you've spoken about how what we're doing now is for our next lifetime. Would you speak a little bit about that?
Is that all of us have, know about The Secret, and we know that people are doing manifestation, and they're tearing pages out of books and making, what they want. But the reality is, every thought and everything you do, every action you take, every decision you make goes in the pot for the next experience. Now, the next experience, if you're 10, maybe when you're 30. Or the next experience when you're 30, maybe when you're 50. Or the next experience may be the next life. Or it all may end up in the pot towards the next life, because it is the entire frequency set of all actions and decisions that counts.
So one could apply that to this lifetime. Like
yes,
what
you're experiencing has something to do with previous experiences. So if you were a person who had children in the last 4 lifetimes, maybe you have many children, you may choose that, I think I got that. I think I know that. I'd like to learn about finance. Or I think I'd like to be an architect. Or I think I'd like to do something different, because the soul seeks variety and expansion. So the soul is looking for expansion and variety. It's not a negative if you choose not to have children, or you choose not to get married, or maybe you've done that. Maybe you got that part. Maybe now there's something else that you've exhausted what you needed to learn from that. So these things happen. Looking at things on the surface through the eyes of judgment of the third dimension is not a good idea, because there's more. There's more. So we're at the end of our discussion about death today, and I'd like to ask you if you'll pull a card, and will you share with us what your question is?
I was asking to see the truth that we must understand about death, and the card theme is consciousness. This is associated with the third eye. And the maxim reads, the future is constantly changing its potentialities exponentially based on what is being thought. And that definitely spoke
to what we just said.
Well, certainly.
Like,
due to time,
we're
I'm going to
changing. It's like reconfiguring with every thought, every action, what the next anticipated expectation shall be.
Yeah, that's that Akashic talk.
We thank you for joining us. We are so happy that you came. We hope that we will see you again. We give you thanks in Imlakash and Veritas with honor, respect, and gratitude. Thank you.